Hello and welcome back to Beyond the Scream, the podcast where we peel back the layers of horror, film and television to uncover the themes, imagery and cultural conversation lurking beneath the surface. I'm Rob Taylor.
And I'm Emma Arneil. Each month we take a deep dive into one work of horror, exploring not just how it scares us, but why it resonates, what it has to say about life, death, morality and everything in between.
This month we're heading into one of the most fascinating and I'd argue underrated sequels in horror cinema history. That is The Exorcist 3, directed by William Peter Blatty and released in 1990.
That's right. Often overshadowed by William Friedkin's The Exorcist from 1973, Blatty's film takes the mythology in a very different direction. Instead of focusing on possession in the traditional sense, it becomes part detective story, part theological meditation and part supernatural horror.
And what we really want to look at today are the themes that make this film so distinctive. The omnipresence of death, the battle between good and evil, and what Blatty himself called luminous life, that flicker of grace, of transcendence that cuts through darkness.
Exactly. The Exorcist 3 is filled with corpses, murder and despair, but it's also a film obsessed with questions of faith, redemption and the possibility of something beyond the grave. It's a horror film that terrifies, yes, but it also mourns, questions and ultimately insists on the possibility of hope.
So we're going to trace how these themes play out across the narrative and the murders that open the film to that unforgettable climax, and think about how The Exorcist 3 speaks to broader cultural anxieties in the late 20th century.
And of course, we'll talk about why it has one of the most famous jump scares in horror history because, well, we can't not talk about it.
Absolutely. So grab your crucifix, steel your nerves, and join us as we step into the shadowy corridors of The Exorcist 3. So I saw The Exorcist 3 on VHS back around about the time it was released in 1991 on tape, I think, and it was on the shelf, and it was the only, at that time The Exorcist wasn't available, the original Exorcist wasn't available on VHS, it had been banned by the BBFC, so we weren't allowed to see it at home, so this was the only avenue I had into the Exorcist world, and I rented this, and well, I didn't rent it, I persuaded people older than me to rent it for me, but yeah, I always found the film really fascinating, and I think a lot of the film is about the real sort of grounding in friendship and family and sort of values that we all have day to day against this backdrop of serial killing, horror, murder, racism. There's themes that are creeping in from real life that are out there. They're ultimately the horrors that are out there. I think I was too young to appreciate that overall context at the time. However, it's also very creepy, and it's very well executed in many ways, in many scenes. And William Peter Blatty has done this before. He's done this with films like The Ninth Configuration in 1980. He uses a lot of... his dialogue's amazing. He writes really natural dialogue that you would imagine best friends speaking or people in the street speaking, just natural and comical. And William Peter Blatty was a comedy writer, initially working with Blake Edwards back in the 60s with Pink Panther movies and being screenwriter for those films. So he was a comedy writer. People think of him as horror writer, but he, essentially his background's comedy. So he's very good at creating a real kind of warm atmosphere in this film in terms of the characters of Lieutenant Kinderman and Father Dyer, whose friendship, of course, has bloomed from the death of Damien Karras back in the original Exorcist. So we many years later we come to them again and they're best friends and they go and see cinema together and they're movie fans and and there's some real great dialogue, but it's set against this sinister backdrop of sort of religious imagery and evil, evil acts. The film opens with a grotesque murder of a black child, Thomas Kentry, who's decapitated and his head's replaced with the head of the statue of Christ. And he's crucified on a pair of oars from the local dock area in God, where's it set?
Georgetown.
Yes, Washington. Yeah. So I mean, it's a very grim start, and it starts with a dream sequence as well, which is also, there's elements of the surreal that go through this film. Usually through dream sequences that usually take place before an actual murder takes place. So I've gone off on a tangent there, but yeah, I saw this film when I was 11, 12 years old, and it was purely because I wanted to see an Exorcist movie, and I wasn't able to access the original Exorcist, and I was somewhat surprised by this sequel being really, really good and captivating and interesting. George C. Scott's fantastic.
Yeah.
He carries that entire movie. Really unfairly nominated for Razzie.
Yeah, I saw that today, and I thought it's
incredible when you look at that. And I think someone described him as being an old ham, but his acting is so subtle, and there's scenes in that film where he carries real grief, and it's under the surface. There's a scene later where he loses his temper and he gets emotional, which is normal and natural, and that's what we do, when we respond to grief and death. But he does a fantastic job, as he did in his other supernatural movie, The Changeling, back in 1980. Again, carries the weight of this ghost story back in 1980, and does a terrific job of performance, believability, really. I love the film. I've become to understand it more as time goes on, and being able to read more sort of theological elements into it as I've gotten older, and obviously experience life as well.
Yeah.
You start to experience life and understand that life is difficult and painful, and there's a sense of suffering in life, and I think this really comes through in the film, in that everyday people try and get through life with difficulties and pain and suffering. I think it's amazing. Yeah,
it is. It's fantastic. I don't remember the first time that I saw it. I think I saw, and we'll talk about this in depth later, I think I saw the famous jump scare scene first. And I think it was on one of the kind of talking head 100 scariest moments type thing. Have seen it there, and obviously it's become a bit of a gif and a meme now, but so that prompted me to seek it out. And initially I saw Exorcist 3, and then today, for this evening, I watched Legion. So you and I are speaking about the same film but different cuts of it. So I think you're going to be speaking about, or speaking to the theatrical cut, and mine will be the more director's cut. I think
there is quite stark differences between the two. So that'll be an interesting angle to talk about the film on, because there are two different cuts now. The film was heavily interfered with post-production. They spent about 4 million reshooting scenes to add in at the end, which was to actually have an actual exorcism in the film, which is a bit kind of shoved in there. I mean, it's heavy, isn't it? It works, but it's a bit, as you say, heavy-handed, and compared to the rest of the subtlety of the film, you get this kind of brazen, outlandish, floor opening up and hell rising scene towards the end of the film.
And that came from the studio. That was Warner Brothers, wasn't it? It was their kind of
Morgan Creek, and they were the ones that pushed for retaining the name The Exorcist, which Blatty didn't want to have attached. He wanted Legion
Yeah.
which is the title of the book that
Yes.
he's based this screenplay and film on, his own book. But they wanted The Exorcist in the title, and then further pressure led to actually shooting an Exorcist scene at the end of the film with Father Morning, played by Nicole Williamson. And yeah, they brought Jason Miller into the film at that point. Brad Dourif is probably more present in the cut that you saw.
Yes. There's no Jason Miller in the cut that I saw. It's Brad Dourif the whole way through.
Yeah. And I think Brad Dourif was originally going to be entirely replaced by Jason Miller.
Oh, really?
Yes. But Jason Miller was quite unwell.
Yeah.
At the time, he was struggling to get through. There's scenes where those scenes in the asylum in the cell are huge monologues that
He was just struggling to
Jason
kind of
Miller
cope.
didn't have the capacity to do, sadly, at that point in his life. But he nevertheless, the fact that in the theatrical, both Brad Dourif and Miller appear as the one entity or the switch is really quite cool. I like that idea.
I like that idea that there's this duality of, well, it's more than a duality, isn't it? Because there's the idea that it is Brad Dourif's kind of body, but then it's also Father Karras. But then they also make mention to the Master, which you're never quite sure, is that Pazuzu or is it actually the devil himself? So, and then there's the kind of the inhabitation of the other people.
Yeah.
So there's within this kind of character, there's all these elements to it, which I thought was really, really interesting. And I do remember when I saw the original, if you like, being really struck by that Jason Miller's face was never really Karras. It was Karras as the demon.
Yes.
Which was a really striking image for me when I saw The Exorcist. I remember being really terrified by that, just in those last few moments where, the demons inhabited him and his face just changes so quickly, far quicker than Reagan's does. And that's what you see. But maybe I'm misremembering it. I don't think you just see him as he is, or do you?
There's glimpses of.
Oh, is there?
There are. I mean, and it's all in shadow. There's one moment where Jason Miller's eyes are lit and everything else is dark, and his eyes are normal. So there are elements of Father Karras there, but you're right. There's the demonic side of Karras, the possessed Karras that we saw at the end of The Exorcist before his death, appears several times in that scene, along with Brad Dourif, who plays he's the Gemini killer who's also passed away, who's not alive,
That's
so there's
right.
this kind of mixture of and you're right about the, is it the demon, is it the devil, is it Pazuzu? I didn't actually, until I listened to the audio commentary recently on The Exorcist 3, the Arrow Blu-ray, Alexander Nichols and her I forget who co-hosts with her, but they were talking about the scene earlier where Father Dyer and Kinderman go to the cinema, and it's To See a Wonderful Life.
That's right, yeah.
And I had never made this connection before, but in The Wonderful Life, there's the character called Zuzu.
Oh, wow.
And there seems to be, it's almost, that's not an accident. They reckon this is,
Wow.
So there's indication there that we are dealing with Pazuzu. There's little elements. Blatty does that. He does make really subtle references, and you have to be really observant about what you're seeing and what you're hearing as well, because Blatty will drop things in the midst of dialogue that will actually have deeper meaning if you really read into it, and I think that's but yes, I hadn't realised that before, but just, you're touching on, we're not quite sure if it's Pazuzu or not. There's certainly an earlier hint in the film that I wasn't aware of, that certainly was a character in Wonderful Life who is called Zuzu.
And are they a goodie? I take it.
That is the little girl, I think, in Wonderful Life. Yeah.
Well, there we go.
So
if you think about sort of It's a Wonderful Life being about angels,
yes,
because we've got Clarence,
mm-hmm.
who has to get his angel wings,
yeah,
and the innocence of children and child of Zuzu, and then you've got the absolute, that flipped on its head. We're dealing with demons and devils and darkness, and
well,
there we go.
Father Dyer becomes an angel as well. You know, he passes over into
Yes.
the afterlife, and there's that dream sequence.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, so there's indications of angels and demons throughout The Exorcist 3, which is really, really wonderfully done.
And we've got the. Did you spot who plays Father Dyer in this film?
Yes, it's Ed Flanders. Yeah, yeah.
And can you remember what else he's been in?
He was in Ninth Configuration.
Oh, was he? Right.
He was, yeah. You'll need to...
He's Susan's dad in Salem's Lot. He's the doctor.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
He was in Salem's Lot. Yeah, God,
Yeah.
I forgot that. Yeah.
Gets impaled on...
That's right.
It's like deer antlers or something, isn't it?
Yes, something like that. I haven't seen Salem's Lot for a long time. But yeah, no, you're right. Ed Flanders is... And sadly passed away tragically.
Oh, no.
Not long after The Exorcist 3 was
Oh, no. What happened to him?
It's very kind of, he suffered from a lot of pain, so took his own life, I believe.
Gee whiz.
Around about 1995 or something. He was still young.
Yeah.
Such a shame. You know, he's a really gifted actor. And him and George C. Scott together are just...
It's electric.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And that's what I mean by the idea of friendship and that humour that comes through, the banter that they have. You know, George C. Scott arriving late to the cinema, but arriving in the police car, clearly misusing his role to both arrive at cinema and later to get admission to cinema by flashing his lieutenant's badge, you know, because it's police business. You know, you can see Ed Flanders, Father Dyer, kind of, you know, just sighing at this constant betrayal of, you know, society values that Kinderman doesn't show any apparent respect.
Well, there's nothing worse than somebody coming into a film late, so...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, exactly, yeah. And then Father Dyer's got to buy his
lemon drops.
His lemon drops. And just that's what I mean by the idea of this really kind of warm friendship and funny, genuinely funny, you know, interaction between both, and you really believe they're best of friends. You know, I think that's testament to Scott and Flanders' performances.
Definitely.
You know? And that's where, and again, this is in line with Blatty's material, is that there is often humour in the darkest of material.
Maybe you should go home and rest.
I can't go home.
Why?
The carp.
You know, I thought you said...
My wife's mother is visiting, Father. And Tuesday night she's cooking us a carp. It's a tasty fish. I have nothing against it. But because it's supposedly filled with impurities, she buys it live. And for 3 days it's been swimming up and down in my bathtub. Up and down. And I hate it. I can't stand the sight of it. Moving its gills. Now, you're standing very close to me, Father. Have you noticed? Yes. I haven't had a bath for 3 days. I can't go home until the carp is asleep. Because if I see it swimming, I'll kill it.
Dyer and Kinderman have a deep, deep love for each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it is, and it's obviously been born from this utter tragedy of them losing Father Karras in the first film, because obviously Father Dyer is there to give him the last rites at the end of The Exorcist, and then we see them kind of connect with the same funny lines from the first, you know, from Damien and Kinderman's first meeting about, I've seen it blah, blah, blah. And it's just so lovely the way that just continues, and you get, there's not any big exposition dump.
No.
There's another priest that says, "Oh, you still going to the cinema with him," or words to that effect.
So the priest says, "What?" And then he asks, "What's your favourite movie?" And the priest's like,
The Fly. Wonder which one.
Fucking love that line.
It's so deadpan as well.
It's really, that's what I mean. And there is, and I don't know. I'm misremembering now because I don't think it's in the theatrical. But Father Dyer comments about how Kinderman made, said that this film was so much about love and connection and thing. And Father Dyer says, but you said the same about Eraserhead, and it's just, there's that continual dialogue, and then that carp story, as you described, Ed Flanders does show that there's obviously, I think the way that George C. Scott delivers his frustration at this live carp living in his bathtub, it's such a ridiculous story that you see the outburst. And I love the idea that, because it's, the whole idea is Kinderman says, I've got to go because today's our day for cheering up Father Dyer. Mm-hmm. And Father Dyer says the same thing about Kinderman. This is the anniversary of Damien Karras' death, which is another signifier for what's to come, obviously, the return of Karras.
And I love, there's a scene where it's right at the start, and it's just as Father Dyer is chatting away to, I don't know if it's a student or a younger priest, and he's like, "Oh, isn't this the day that Damien Karras?" And he's like, "Yep, And then he probes again. This young guy kind of probes again, and you're getting annoyed with him. You're like, leave him alone. You're like, you're picking at a scab here.
Dyer says, doesn't he?
And he's like, get lost.
Father, you mentioned the Damien Karras in your prayer for the dead.
Yes, I did.
Father, isn't he the one who
Yes.
died in a fall on those steps?
Yes, that's right, Tim. 15 years ago today.
You hear a lot of
Philip, and get lost, will you?
And I love that about him, is that yes, he's a priest, and we see this, and I'll not keep harking back to the first film, but we see this in the first film, is that he's in no way pious. There is no kind of, how to describe it, but there's no kind of, he doesn't ram religion down anybody's throat. He's very real. He's the way he speaks is just so kind of grounded, and it doesn't ever seem to me like he's hiding behind his religion or his position. He's there to help, and you see that in the conversation that Kinderman says. Like when we first meet Kinderman, he is world weary. You can see that in his eyes when he's dealing with that first murder of the young boy. You can just tell that he has just seen so much darkness in his life that he's like, kind of being a human is just the pits. It's the absolute pits.
You've been prowling this neighborhood, Father. Right now. While our children suffer. And our loved ones die, and your God goes waltzing blithely through the universe like some kind of cosmic Billy Burke.
Bill, it all works out right.
When?
At the end of time.
That soon?
No, we're going to be there. We're going to live forever, Bill. We're spirits.
Oh, I would love to believe that.
It's that kid that got killed on the dock, isn't it? I heard it on the news. You want to talk about it? You knew it.
A little bit. Police Boys Club. His name was Thomas Kintry. Black boy, about 12 years old. The killer drove an ingot into each of his eyes and cut off his head.
Is this okay, Father? I can get you something else. Some more coffee?
place of his head was the head from a statue of Christ. All done up in blackface, like a minstrel show, you know. The eyes and the mouth painted white. Mr. Bones. The boy had been crucified on a pair of rowing oars.
And you can see that, and obviously the bright light for him is his family, maybe not his mother-in-law, his family and his friendship.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and it carries such a kind of positive.
That's the thing of the luminous life in the darkness, you know, because we have darkness in life.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you talk about this sort of world-weary aspect of George C. Scott. George C. Scott is a leading actor in 1990, and he's a man in his 60s at that point. That's really unusual for a leading actor.
Yeah.
And you pretty much don't see that nowadays, you know. It is an older cast.
Yes.
And it's I don't know why that is now. Am I wrong in saying that? There's not older cast anymore really in films. There's, you know, especially of, you know, supernatural or, you know, horror films, there seems to be quite a sort of younger presence in the casting.
Well, I suppose at that time we would have had the dirge of kind of teen slashers and things. It would have just been the kind of horror environment would have just been oversaturated with
Absolutely, it would have been a
bad sequels.
Dynamic, yeah. And The Exorcist 3 was quite well received, I think, when it first was released. I don't think it's been celebrated maybe as much in the days since the theatrical release, but certainly now it's got a resurgence. And thankfully, I think it was due to a fan edit that we now have Legion. You know, a fan edit kind of inspired people to go back to the vaults and try and source the, sadly only exists on VHS, but the other footage that was cut from the film, so there's a resurgence to the film now. But back in 1990, I'm trying to think contextually, we wouldn't have had a cast of that age range normally.
No.
And there is a weariness to them, and there's that scene, and it breaks my heart every time I see him when after Father Dyer is murdered, and George C. Scott has to go in and identify his friend. And you don't see anything other than George C. Scott's expression. He's going round the bed, the body's covered, and he sort of lifts to see if the finger's missing. And you can see, you know, there's no vocalization, there's no wailing or crying, but he's in pain. You can see him going, and then he goes around the other side to find that, you know, he's been beheaded. And it's, you know, and it's his best friend. And that's where I get really angry about the sort of critical responses towards George C. Scott, who's a magnificent actor. I believe he was quite a feisty man in his time.
Got some chat about that.
Yeah, but he does a fantastic job. And it's subtle, and that's what grief is like. We don't always have an emotional response that's visual to death. Especially death of the people we love. It can be inward. There's a scene a bit later on where he finally loses his temper in the hospital, and then he starts to cry after losing his temper, you know. And it's a very real performance of that. That's bullshit about him hamming it up and just utter. I can't remember who wrote that, but it was written at the time, and it was really, really unfair. Yeah.
Yeah.
That cast is impeccable, actually.
They are fantastic.
Sorry, I went off on
a
rant there.
No. I'd heard today. Was it today? Yeah, I think it was. That because George C. Scott is such a magnificent talent, Brad Dourif was really intimidated by him.
Yes,
do you know?
And they have a long scene together, don't they?
Yeah,
yes.
And a lot of their scenes was actually Brad Dourif just monologuing into the camera, but George C. Scott wanted to be there to observe and to kind of keep the keep the momentum of their acting going. But it got so that Brad Dourif had actually had to ask him, please please don't be watching me because you're
really?
you're such an immense talent. I'm in my head here, and I'm overthinking it, and actually,
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
It was really, it must be, because I mean, George C. Scott was an actor of caliber. I mean,
Yeah.
massive. 50s and 60s, Doctor Strangelove, and was various from Patton. Lots of films that George C. Scott is a significant figure in Hollywood, and a legend of that. So, especially in the 90s when we're starting to come into sort of new cinema, new Hollywood. George C. Scott's from the classic era of Hollywood, so it must have been intimidating. It's lovely to hear that you wanted to stay behind, though. You imagine,
get to my trailer, just let me,
I've done my bit, I want to, but the fact that he stayed behind, I think, says a lot about George C. Scott.
You kind of like to think that he obviously, a few things actually, that he obviously had respect for this film, because actually if he didn't, you would imagine that he would have just buggered off to his trailer or whatever. But you also kind of get the sense that perhaps he was trying to nurture a bit of talent in Brad Dourif, who I think is really, really undervalued as an actor. I think he's fantastic, and I think it's I think now he's definitely getting more kind of praise for his performances and the work that he does.
He became Chucky for so many years, didn't he? He was
but
the
I think,
voice of Chucky, so...
And he's got such a love for that character as well, which I think is really nice. He's quite... He always comes across as quite earnest, and everything that he's doing, he seems to believe in. Do you know, I think of him in Lord of the Rings, and he's just amazing. He's just fantastic as... what's his name? Is it Wormtail? Can't remember what his name is, but he's
I'm not a big Lord
he's
of the
in
Rings
he's in the
person,
second one.
Right.
We've got an eclectic cast, haven't we? We've got some fun little cameos, but you've got a wee list there, haven't you, Rob?
I do. Well, Colleen Dewhurst is the ex-wife of George C. Scott, and she plays the voice, or she voiced the demon or Satan or whomever, Pazuzu, whoever we assume this embodiment to be, which is only something I recently learned. But in that dream sequence, in this vast, purgatory state of the Grand Central Station train station on the way to heaven, we've got a whole host of people appearing oddly.
Yes.
Really, we've got Fabio, who was
Fabio.
Italian model from the time, very sort of, very butch kind
chiseled, kind of long hair,
blonde hair model, and then we've got Patrick Ewing, who was American football coach, or is an American football coach now for the NBA. He plays the Angel of Death, dealing out the cards. Very early appearance from Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes.
In that scene as well.
And Larry King. Larry King's in it as well.
Miss Larry King, right. So it is an odd sequence, and then we topped it off with a sort of Glenn Miller-esque band that's playing. They're all waiting to go to heaven. This is a very odd scene, and obviously this is the scene where Kinderman in his dream learns that Father Dyer's there. And dreams that Father Dyer,
and we see the stitches on his neck
to indicate that he has been beheaded, and it's a very poignant scene.
Yeah, and we are reminded of the dream sequence in the first one, in that it goes black and white, and it's just that kind of...
This is in the Legion cut.
Yes, and then that's how... So Legion starts in black and white, because I was worried that there was something wrong with my disc. I was like, oh Christ, what have I done?
Right, it is at begin, whereas it's full colour in the theatricals.
So it's full colour from the kick-off.
There's no black and white segments at all.
Right. And we have, so we're in the church, the doors blow open, we see, it works because it's a dream sequence. If it had been anything else, I think it would have been really schlocky. Was the so you see the statue of Christ, the doors of the church blow open, and then the next thing the eyes open and the mouth opens.
That image is in the theatrical, and that's the version I grew up in. In fact, that was one of the first scenes that really freaked me out.
It is creepy.
It's this image of Christ with his eyes open. And there is, when you go into, sort of, certainly within sort of Catholic imagery, there is quite grisly depictions of Christ being crucified, and I suppose I've always found that quite frightening. I think I had an aunt who had a crucifix of Christ on the wall.
Oh, really?
I used to go and visit. And
did it have its eyes open or closed?
I can't remember, but I just remember the image of it being quite horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. I don't know how to describe this. It's not what I was used to seeing. Obviously I'm not Catholic, and I didn't grow up in a Catholic household, but it was imagery that I wasn't used to seeing. It's disturbing, and you're right. The eyes are closed on Christ when we initially see him. The doors blast open. We turn back to Christ. His eyes are open and gaping, and again, sort of surrealist element to that, because it's a statue.
Yeah. It really reminded me of the creepy Christ in Carrie's cupboard.
Yes.
The really pained Jesus Christ statue that she has. When she's fumbling to light she's been banished to the cupboard.
Yes.
And she's fumbling to light candles. She manages to light them, and then there's like a bit of it's not quite a jump scare, but there's like a shot where you see this horrible depiction of Christ on the cross.
Yes.
And it's a really pained, terrifying looking face. It reminded me of that.
Absolutely. That image in Carrie as well is probably, again, it's another image that stayed with me as a younger person when I was sort of exploring horror beyond the sort of universal classics and the Hammer horrors. I started getting into Carrie and American horror and exploring a bit more explicit horror. Those images of Christ are probably the first kind of things that I found quite creepy. And you think about the pained expression of Christ, obviously being crucified, being murdered in that way is
agonising.
Yeah. So, the depiction's not off in any way whatsoever.
No, we're just...
and it's not softened, but in this film where we're talking about a child being murdered in the same manner, also being beheaded, and also being alive during it, because there's a description later on where the audience is allowed to hear that Thomas Kentry was injected with some kind of poison that paralysed him.
That's right.
He was still conscious whilst he was being murdered.
And it was asphyxiation that killed him. Well, obviously, that was the initial cause of death, and then his head was removed and stuff. But it's such a grisly death.
It's that kind of humanity, the way that humanity can extend to those depths of torture and killing, and that comes through in real life. We have it in real life, and I think that comes through in the idea of this film, in that there is a grimness to life, and yet these sources of joy are friendships that we have, the family that we have. These are the things that are important, the things we love. That really comes across as a theme. There's you don't need to have faith, you don't need to believe in Christ, but you have to have value of yourself and your family and the things that are important to you. That's love. That's what we need. Ideally, we need to find meaning in life. And the film's also not afraid to say the thing that we're all afraid to say, is that life is actually about suffering.
Yes.
We are meant to suffer. And it sounds, I know that sounds very kind of fire and brimstone, but I think we are. We're not meant to be happy all the time. We're meant to be up and down. Yeah. This idea in terms of, and mental health is an epidemic now. It's but I think there's this sense that we're meant to be okay. Well, actually, we're not okay, and we actually do suffer, and that I think that's quite an important message, and I think that does come through in the film.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely a kind of nihilistic tone to the film, isn't there? There's just this that sometimes life is bleak.
As the film moves on, it's nihilistic, and in the original ending, which again I don't know if this exists in the cut because I haven't seen Legion for a few years now, but in The Exorcist 3 the ending was meant to be George C. Scott shooting Karras as a mercy killing to release him, and then there's just a shot to the sun, this orange bright sun, which kind of mirrors the opening of The Exorcist.
Yes, in Iraq.
The Iraq sun, it opens on that. So, and then the film was meant to completely fade, and that's almost like a film ending you wouldn't get in the 90s. You would get in earlier cinema, a sort of nihilistic ending such as that. It's a little bit more in the theatrical beyond that, in that there was indication that they've dug up Father Karras' grave. And I'm not sure if the idea is that his body's not there, which would evidently make sense if he's been elsewhere, or if there's a sense that he's been reinterred.
Yes, because on his gravestone, is there not like three? Is there not 3 dates?
Yeah, there's when he was born, and then I think there's a date when he was indoctored into the church. And then
right.
There's the death date of 75, which is a bit...
Which would...
It's not quite right in terms of the sort
story,
of release of the Exorcist. But, sorry, I don't know where I was going with that. Yeah, so I think there's an idea that, we only see George C. Scott and another detective looking down into a grave. We're looking up at them, and then the film closes. So we're kind of left... It's a bit ambiguous as to what they're doing, what they've done, and...
And in Legion, he shoots Brad Dourif. It's Brad Dourif that he shoots in the head. Yeah. And of course, we're then wondering, what does this mean for him? Is he, is this him about to? Well, he's committed murder.
Yeah.
Now, this man who has upheld the law and has protected others and has solved crimes and has been pushed to the point because that which he loves, his family, was threatened. His beloved daughter was almost killed. So he's been pushed to that. He's been taunted by the demon. And obviously in the first film he never had any dealings with the demon. He was kind of external to that. He was speaking to Regan's mum, so he never visited her. He never had any of the dealings that the others had, but he obviously has it within this film where he's taunted, and it's I find that scene with the nurse or the old lady who then infiltrates his home, I find that really creepy.
Patient X,
yeah.
This is a kind of embodiment of Patient X. Well, I take from it that the possession has taken place,
and she's going to do because he says that the catatonics are always the easiest.
And it's there's a good distraction because the earlier lady, the Where's My Radio?
Ceiling Granny.
Yeah. Aye, she pops up in Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, does she?
Yeah.
On the ceiling?
Not on the ceiling.
On the dance floor, just crawling about.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? John Travolta on the ground and she's above. Yeah. No, she pops up. She's Saturday Night Fever. She's like a family member of John Travolta's.
She's not the gran, is she?
Yeah, she's the gran.
Oh my God, yeah. I love that scene.
Sure, that's right.
When he comes out in his pants.
I think so. Yeah.
He comes out and he's like, Al Pacino.
To be honest,
and she crosses herself.
I'm more
going to have to find
with
that.
The sequel, Staying Alive, which is so terrible. It's I just watch it for the opening scene with Frank Stallone's what's the song that Frank Stallone sings?
Can't remember.
It's a great tune, and it's just John Travolta in his sweatpants moving his arse up and down, and I just think it's tremendous. I think the rest of the film is really shit.
No, you don't. You're just saying
maybe
that.
Maybe not. Anyway, so I think there's similarities in both films, the original Exorcist and ninth configuration as well, which I believe has a link to The Exorcist. If I need to rewatch it, but I think that in terms of the astronaut who is in the
You're going to die up there.
You're Going to Die Up There. This is the astronaut meant to
wow.
be in the ninth configuration who aborts his mission and ends up in the asylum due to whatever troubles he's going through. So there's a connection there. But sorry, I'm going off on a tangent there. There's a theme of guilt in both films. So Father Karras, Damien Karras, feeling guilt over the inability to look after his mum, who's living in a place she shouldn't be on her own. It's a really, really painful scene, you know.
It's awful.
And that scene where he goes, and I know we're going on to the original film here, but you know, when his brother, I think his brother,
it's his uncle.
His uncle, sorry, who they go into a mental institution, and it's just horrific.
It's awful.
And you can see, you know, he's so distraught himself.
Broken.
You know, you should have called me earlier. You know, but so there was no options, no money to put her anywhere else.
And he says to him, you know, with reference to Damien's other career, if you like, you know, is you know, if you'd been a big Park Avenue doctor, you'd use these talents and started private practice, we wouldn't be in this situation. We would be coining it in, you know. But
and there's similarity with guilt with George C. Scott not being able to protect Father Dyer.
Yes.
I think that's the rest of the film following Father Dyer's his initial reaction to seeing the body, and in his later anger. I think there's clear indication that he's carrying guilt, that he's been unable to save his best friend.
And I think as well, Dyer carries guilt of Damien, the guilt of Damien, or what Damien went through. Because you see that, and again, it's down to Flanders' excellent acting, as there is such a sadness behind his eyes whenever Damien's mentioned, you know, so good. I really love him in Salem's Lot. Again, this is a bit of a segue. You have to. We have to do Salem's Lot.
We have to do Salem's Lot.
It's brilliant.
But we mentioned the nurse, so we want to talk about the scene.
The scene. Oh, dear God. I want a red cardigan. I really want a red cardigan.
Really?
Yeah. Not after. I just want a red cardigan. But So do you want to set the scene?
Well, we have. So it is Nurse Keating, played by Tracy Thorn, who, rather than become this typical, you know, blonde who is, you know, bumped off in a horror movie, she's actually doing the things as a nurse in a quiet hospital ward. When she hears a noise from a room, she very carefully approaches it. She doesn't just waltz in. And you know, so there's I'm probably not setting this up very well, but there's a scene in the film where the camera remains absolutely static in the same position
at the end of the corridor.
At the end of the corridor, shot from a distance, and we see the nurse going about her duties from ward to ward, or room to room rather, and we see the police detective waiting, you know, watching, and then we see him go off because he's been told to go and do something, so he leaves the premises. She's
and we're a bit
there.
nervous at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, because you know there is a build-up of tension. There's a long scene. The camera doesn't move, stays in the same position. There's a lot of areas where something could happen.
Yeah,
but we're kept on our tiptoes for quite a length of time, and then obviously
we get one jump scare. We get that kind of misdirection of
that's right. I forgot.
She is. It's so beautifully done. So she goes into a patient's room who is sleeping, and we've seen that on these beds, for whatever reason, there are like bolsters. There's like they're pulled up so you can't see who's in the bed.
That's right.
Straight away, and she hears this odd noise again, and then looks down and realizes that it is ice cubes crackling within a glass of water. You see her kind of, you know, kind of reassure herself, oh, that's what it's been. And then the next thing, we have this massive fright from the patient who's really irate. Like the patients in this hospital are raging. The nurses are raging as well. And she admits it herself. She admits that she is on edge. You know,
which it would be.
Yeah, absolutely would be following
him.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a murder in the hospital. She's on night shift and her hackles are up. So the patient shouts and screams at her and really affects her. You know, she said, I'm so sorry, and I'm going to put in a complaint about you. What's your name?
Yes.
And she gives her name, and then she says, I'm sorry. And she goes back to the nurse's station, and the policeman's there, and he sort of says, are you all right? And she says, oh, I'm just a bit rattled. I'm fine. And then as you say, she's going about her business. He goes off again.
Yeah.
And she goes into one room. She goes to close the door, realises she hasn't put the light out, puts the light out, closes the door, and the next thing, your stomach just basically falls out your mouth because there's just this screech of a noise. There's this white figure holding the shears. And then that's it. Cuts to a beheaded statue.
Well, that's it. The violence isn't there. The violence is in the edit.
Yeah.
It's that, you know, it cuts away. We don't see anything, but that shock, and it's that's the only time the camera moves. There's a sort of zoom.
Yeah.
Into that figure.
Yeah.
So it becomes it's basically the only thing in the frame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's very quick. Moment. It's now renowned as one of the biggest jump scares in horror cinema. You know, people, as you say, it's become a meme. It's become a GIF. It's been celebrated culturally. You know, and at that time, I'd never seen anything like that in terms of a jump scare. And it fucking scared the bejesus out of me.
It's unreal.
I couldn't. You know, I remember feeling chilled from that, you know, that kind of shock. Scene is really well done, and again, testament to Blatty's direction, who does the very brave thing of not moving that camera, and you know, it does not move at all.
No,
it's
and you're right. The violence comes from the edit.
Yeah, absolutely,
and the sound.
Cut before the.
You know, we know exactly what's happening.
The shears are pretty much at the nurse's neck.
Yes,
when we cut. But,
yeah.
I mean, we cut away, we don't see anything, but it's
Pardon
enough.
the pun.
Yes, pardon the pun.
But the imagery as well is so perfect, because you're at the end of that corridor and there's a crucifix above the chairs, and there's a kind of waiting area, if you like, to the left of the nurse's station. There's a crucifix above there. She's in a beautiful bright white starched nurse's uniform. She's got her red cardigan on, and then there he appears, and he is just, you know, and again, in a lesser film that would have looked terrible because it's white sheets over a figure.
Yeah.
But I think because he's moving at a pace that how would you even describe it? You can see very much his legs, his arms, his face or his head, so you know it doesn't look like Casper because it's a white sheet over a figure. You can very much tell that this is someone moving with the purpose of really, you know, ready to commit murder.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a really interesting scene to break down. It's interesting to go back over it and see how it's constructed. There's sound in the scene as well, which obviously, because there's initially sound that the nurse becomes aware of.
Yeah.
But it's not a quiet scene. Normally, scenes that have impending shock are met with silence beforehand. This is actually a fairly active scene. I've had shifts, thankfully not had shifts that have ended like that, but I'm working in care sector, you know, I've had night shifts where I've had to do lockups and things like that, and it is eerie.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite a so yeah, I think it's very well done. It's not your, it is obviously set up as a jump scare. It's what's been constructed to do, but it's done in a way that, you know, there's no what's the word?
It's not cheesy
No.
in any way.
No, it's
Do you
not.
know? There's no.
Completely sinister. It's absolutely sinister. From the off, even before the moment of the reveal, the scene is just drenched in.
Oh, it's dread. Yeah. And you think of something like, kind of the Conjuring franchise, you know, and those films kind of get described as being quiet, quiet, bang. That's where the scares come from, is that quiet, quiet, bang thing. It doesn't have that at all. It is.
And the film doesn't play for that.
No.
I think that is the one jump scare in the entire film. There are really horrible moments in film. It's like the confessional booth murder. You know, there's really creepy elements, and there's no intention to direct a jump scare or a cheap scare.
Yes.
I have a scrupulous conscience, Father. This need to confess so many things. If I step on two straws in the shape of a cross, I feel that I have to confess it. It torments me.
Try to make a good confession. And remember, Christ forgives us all of our sins.
Only little things. Nothing. 17 of them, Father. The first was that waitress near Candlestick Park. I cut her throat and watched her bleed. She bled a great deal. It's a problem that I'm working on, Father. All this bleeding.
Do you feel like this film belongs within a franchise, or do you think it could serve on its own?
I think, in very practical terms, it does belong in the franchise because it's The Exorcist 3. That's the title. So it does, annoyingly for me, belong.
Because 2 is so bad.
Well, I've got a kind of...
Is that a guilty pleasure?
I've got a fondness of The Exorcist 2 because it's not every day that you see James Earl Jones in the back of a giant bug flying.
Well, maybe you don't, but...
You know, there's elements in that film that are really good.
Do you think?
Yeah, Richard Burton's really underrated in it. He overplays it a bit, but he's really...
He looks pissed off.
Yeah.
He does not want to be there.
No,
he's there for a
I
paycheck.
think Richard Burton was probably struggling with his own demons at that point as well. But there are elements to it. There are elements that are just shockingly bad.
You're there for the tap dancing.
What was it? Well, no, not even that. You know, Linda Blair doesn't. You know, I'm not. But you know, there's a scene where she says, "Oh, I used to be possessed by a demon, but I'm okay now." You know, and it's just
that just reminds me of that like proper dad joke where it's like, "Oh, I used to be a werewolf, but I'm all right now."
Yeah. There are really, and you think John Boorman directed that. John Boorman's amazing. He did Deliverance, Excalibur, which was a film he did after Exorcist 2. You know, so, but then for me, there's worse. You know, there's The Beginning with Rennie Harlan. You know, in his film, and I just think that is a crock of shit. The Exorcist Believer.
Don't.
Fucking disappointed. To so many degrees, I was quite angry.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, and I really wanted to like it. Because I could see that they were trying to tap into some of the imagery of the original, or some of the quietness of the original. It's just such a shit show.
Can I tell you my experience of Exorcist the Believer? So you and I were in the very, very, very early stages of kind of communicating at that point.
Oh, really?
So I'd gone down to Reading as part of an Evolution of Horror screening to see the original on
Oh yeah, I remember you
Reading
saying,
Biscuit
yeah,
Factory.
Yes, that's right.
And it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I had this t-shirt on, my Exorcist t-shirt on.
Wow.
And it was introduced by the fantastic Becky Dark. And it was, I'd never seen it on the big screen before. I'd only ever seen it on sort of at home. And I just remember the minute it started, actually sitting forward in my seat in this tiny little auditorium and just almost crying with, this is just perfect and this is how this film should be seen.
Yeah.
So Mr. Arneil and I, we had a couple of days down in Reading because of this. He absolutely indulges all my little things that I want to go to and all the rest of it. So we had a full day before our flight back up the next day. So we'd seen The Exorcist in the evening, and then the next day we were flying back, but it wasn't until like a nighttime flight. So we were like, right, what will we do? We'll go and see The Exorcist Believer. And it was just horrendous. I've never ever, because I hate people that do it, I've never ever been noisy in a cinema, but I actually remember at bits through the film being like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, really? Like, and shifting about and actually being like, when is this over? Because this is like an assault on perfection. You've taken elements of possibly one of the best, or I'm not even going to say possibly, one of the best films in the world of all time, and you have just dragged it through this utter horseshit.
It really is. I mean, there's nothing really with that. Well, for me, I mean, I'm sure it will have its audiences, but there's nothing for me that works in the film at all, really. Hugely disappointing. I just, it would almost be better if it just did a retread of the original. But they didn't even do that. They went off on tangents.
No. And it became like the Avengers. Let's try and get as many people from as many faiths as we can.
And well, that's the other thing too. And I just, it's always been. Am I right to say The Exorcist is a Catholic movie? It is. It's about Catholicism. It's about, it's. I don't know. I just didn't know what they were trying to do.
No.
It's just messy. Apparently there's going to be another.
Oh, Jesus.
There is another, but they're disbanding.
Yes, and it's Mike Flanagan now.
Mike Flanagan, which gives me some hope.
As you know, I am a big Flana fan.
Yeah, a Flana fan.
I'm a big Flana fan. And the apparently the only reason, and this might make you soften ever so slightly towards it, because it's the only thing that has kind of redeemed it in the tiniest way for me, is that Ellen Burstyn was asked time and time again to join the cast, and she said no, and then she said no, and then she said no, and they kept chucking more money at her, and then she said, right, if you double that, I'll do it. And she donated it to the local acting college.
Oh.
So there was so from that absolute nonsense, there's been a new kind of
facility.
Where young actors have been able to get a scholarship to this acting school. So
always nice.
That's redeemable.
A bit of redemption there, isn't there?
But I mean, that probably just speaks to how fantastic Ellen Burstyn is. And she is fantastic. She's an absolute.
But going back to the franchise, it's very much for me, in my head, the films are The Exorcist, ninth configuration, kind of, and then The Exorcist 3. That's it.
You
know, even Paul Schrader's cut of this Exorcist beginning, Dominion, which had a bit more substance to it.
I wasn't mad at that, but then I love Stellan Skarsgård, so
yeah, I mean it's an okay film, you know, it's certainly better than what came after it.
Yeah.
You know? But there's nothing really. I mean, you're talking about atmospherics. You need to look at, you know, the original film with Friedkin and then Blatty's vision in The Exorcist 3. It almost makes me want to imagine what Blatty would have done if he directed the original Exorcist. You know, how would that have looked? Because Friedkin went for a very sort of documentary.
Well, that was his
aesthetic.
That was
kind of French Connection.
Yeah.
That was the same way it was shot. Whereas Blatty has a lot more surrealism and a lot more cinema, actually, quite cinematic in his vision.
I think as well, one of the things that definitely comes from this film as well is that it's a bit of a love letter to film, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and he does that. He references films throughout a lot of his work. He's clearly a film lover. He loves film, and I mean, I think I haven't seen it for many years, but Ninth Configuration has a lot of film references as well.
I think I'm going to have to watch this. I don't know this one at all.
Yeah, no, it's well worth seeking out. I've not seen it maybe for 15 years. I do have it on disc. I've never sat down to it for a long time. Scott Wilson's in it. Scott Wilson, who plays Dr. Temple in Exorcist 3. You know, the nervous chain smoking.
Oh.
You know, Scott Wilson's in Ninth Configuration as well. Ed Flanders, we talked about, he's in Ninth Configuration. So there's cast that's been brought over from that film into The Exorcist 3 as well. It's definitely worth seeing. And I think Blatty did class it as the original true sequel to The Exorcist.
Right. Because he didn't want to...
In the light of The Exorcist.
And that was one of the reasons he didn't want the... he didn't want the Exorcist branding, because he didn't want to acknowledge that there'd been a second one.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, he didn't want to. I mean, it was
calling it 3, you have to acknowledge that there's been a second.
Well, that's it. And I think to answer your question, it is, you know, through its you know, the way it's been titled, I think it belongs to a franchise. Yeah. Sadly.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the franchise for me is, you know, largely shit.
Yeah.
But, you know, the original film, The Exorcist 3, and Ninth Configuration, if we want to bring that into it, are the three standout films. And they all work, and they all have that same, you know, sort of sinister, comedic, but slightly... Well, the original film doesn't have much comedy, but in terms of...
But there are bits.
There are, you know...
There are some bits. I think we're going to have to do an Exorcist episode now, aren't we?
We'll just do it now. We'll just...
Come with us, guys.
What's the name of the director in The Exorcist? The one that gets killed?
Oh, God.
Let's see, he's getting drunk in the kitchen. He's like, "Oh, you Nazi cunt." Something like that.
Nazi bastard.
Nazi bastard.
What is his name? Yeah. My favourite bit is when they're in the scene outside the college, and he sort of says, Ellen Burstyn says, you know, what is this? I don't understand this. And he's like, shall we fetch the writer? He's in Paris, I believe. And she's like hiding, and he's like, fucking. And everybody laughs, and it's almost cheesy, but it does always get me smile.
Good deliveries there, yeah.
What was his? That's going to annoy me.
It is annoying, yes. We'll need to correct that at some point. But yeah, I think The Exorcist 3 really, for me, is phenomenal. It's one of the best, I think I said in the introduction, one of the best horror sequels I've ever seen. And I've yet to see better in that sense. And it's full of sort of... It explores faith, it sort of has theological explorations, it definitely deals with life and death, and I think it does so in a really, really poignant manner, as well as it's, you know, presented within the realms of a horror film, and it is a horror film. Without a doubt, it's probably one of the creepiest films I've seen. Yeah. And can still be creeped out by watching it, you know. Yeah,
definitely. I was watching it on my own, and there was a few wee bits where you're just like, that's glad it's daylight.
Just sort of changing faces of the statues as well. So that Joker face that appears on the statue midway through, the statue changes appearance, and it's like a smiling devil type face,
And the voice, the confession scene is...
Yeah, which is Colleen Dewhurst,
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
And the bit that I really hated was when you see the little pots of blood next to Father Dyer, and
measured.
Yeah, and Kinderman says, "What's this?" And he says it's entire blood supply.
Mm-hmm.
And then later there's reference to that scene where he says something like, "It's never. There's always a few drops. There's never."
Mm-hmm.
And then it's what you wrote. It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes.
And I don't know what it was about that. It just was so creepy.
Yeah.
So creepy.
And it's sort of that essence of being drained as well. There's a scene where Kinderman kind of stumbles. He's kind of in the hospital ward, and it all just gets a bit too much. He stumbles on his own feet, and it's that sense of age and being drained by what, as you said earlier,
weary.
by his experiences and what he's seen, the horrors of life, because it is life that gives us the horrors that that we experience. War, murder, behaviour of people is cruel and torturous, and he's seen that all his life, and it's just this sense where he stumbles, it becomes too much for him, and I just think it's a beautiful movie. It's so well shot, very well scored by De Souza, I think the composer's name is, who did some other films for Blatty. I think he did Nine Configuration as well. But the score, it's not outlandish, bombastic Hollywood score. It's chants and choirs and sound and just distortion, and it's just, the whole thing is a masterpiece. And just any listener that has not seen this film, please track it down. It's so worthy of just even the performances in the films. You will utterly enjoy. They're so well delivered and so real, and there's a fascinating sense of what the meaning of life is, I think. And I think that is a theme, it comes from It's a Wonderful Life, the Jimmy Stewart film that they go and see in the cinema, right through to what does life mean? What is the meaning of life? Is it suffering? Is it love? I think there's so many questions that we can read into that. But I love it, and I champion the film, and I always have, and I always will. And yes.
Yeah, well, it was your idea to chat about this one.
So sorry, folks, if you don't like the film, it's my idea. But yeah, no, it's just phenomenal.
You've been listening to Beyond the Scream. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe. It really helps other horror fans find us. Follow us over on Instagram and Facebook and drop us a little hello. Until next time.